no disregard to Fort Smith Mayor, but he was just, he was a little distraught. He was like, "What?" when they called last week. And then of course I asked Judge Blatt. I was like, "Fort Smith, Vegas, it's close, right?"
Can you go to Vegas?
she did. No disrespect to y'all, but she did say, she was like, "Get on the plane." But no, it's my pleasure to be here. I mean, I honor my commitment. So I'm glad to be here. And I do want to take a minute and tell you sort of a little bit about Rhonda Wood and why this matters to me, and why I'm invested in children in the courts. And when I first graduated law school, I opened a solo practice in Conway. And so I don't want to, she said 17 years as a judge, so that dates me a little bit, but I was dated back to, earlier when I became a judge, but that was before there were no certified or parent counsel, there were no certified ad litem's. And so what happened is I had actually a health law practice, and that's what I started doing. And I got a phone call from then Judge Linda Collier, who had a juvenile docket in Faulkner County, and she called and told me I was appointed for a parent, and I needed to be ready for the termination of parental rights hearing in about 45 days. And I had no experience in juvenile cases. It turns out the mom had never had counsel through the whole process. It was a terrible case, terrible fact pattern. And so it really made me see that there is something seriously wrong with the system at that point in time. And of course we changed dramatically now, and they're appointed, from the point of removal and even earlier than that at some points. But that really was my first entry into the system. And then I ended up, down the road becoming a trial judge and becoming judge at that court. And so I replaced Judge Collier when she retired. And on the bench one day, there was a review hearing set for a young man who was in sort of, we call sort of terminal foster care, right? And he was, 12 or 13 at that stage. And when he walked in, and they'd brought him from, placement way up in Northwest Arkansas, all of a sudden the name clicked and who he was clicked, and that was one of the children from that mom I'd represented. And the rights had been terminated, and he was, still in the system, and actually in a residential placement at 12 and 13. And then my 6 years on the trial court, of course, I had review hearings with him through the whole thing, and it just really sort of touched my heart. And to follow him and follow that process, and it's deeply personal to me. And when that clicked, I mean, I just had to sort of take a moment, and and I told, disclosed it on the record, and it was really sort of heart-wrenching for me to see that from that young man. And then, so I saw those cases and worked with them, and from the trial court. But then why I ended up on the appellate court is I had another termination of parental rights case, and in this one, the mother, really it was not safe for her to continue raising that child, and I saw how caseworkers worked in CASA, and at one part she had gone to visitation, and the child was less than 16 months old, and she ran out of DHS with the child. And when the CASA advocate and the caseworker tried to follow, she tried to run them over, to get out of there with the child, in her arms, driving. It was really unsafe, but I terminated parental rights, and it went up on appeal. And on appeal, the Court of Appeals reversed me. And so it was said that I had to, at that point, I call my juvenile judge friends, and I'm like, what do I do? And I was convinced this mom was going to kill this child. And they said, the consensus was you have to start reunification. If the termination of parental rights has been, your decision's reversed at that point, that's what the law says, you have to now move towards reunification. And I couldn't do it. I absolutely could not do it, and I thought this child was going to die. And so I didn't have a hearing, I didn't do anything, and I just sat and wrote a very lengthy, like 12-page order, and rewrote another order and said, during the hearing, the mother laughed through while the pediatrician was testifying. The mother was pulling her hair out and eating it through it. And I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and entered another order and terminated rights again with no hearing or anything. And all the judges were like, my friend judges were like, you are gonna get reprimanded. You are gonna they were like, when that order comes down from the Court of Appeals, you are gonna get they were like, that is gonna be a front page story about, that you had no authority. And I just was like, you appellate court aren't gonna see what I see. And so I did it, and they actually affirmed that. But the next day, the mother killed herself.
Oh my gosh.
And so that just traumatized me through the whole process. And then I thought, out of the 12 judges at that point on the Court of Appeals, only one of them had ever been a trial judge and had ever sat in a juvenile court. And all of the juvenile cases were going to the Court of Appeals when they get appeal and termination of parental rights. And so that's when I announced and said, I'm running for the appellate court. I may be doing good here, but something's gotta change. And when you're sitting around those tables, they have to understand that the judges aren't perfect, that they're not making these decisions lightly. And had I not written that order, I think a couple things. I think there was a likelihood that mom would have killed the child and herself, but I also think there's a possibility that mom killed herself because she got her hopes up when the first order came that she might get the child back. And it turned out the mom we found out later, had been in California in jail for manslaughter. So she had killed someone in the past. So you know how you don't get everything, on the record. As judges, you always say, if you guys could tell me what the elephant in the room is, I could make a really good decision as a judge.
We always say that we have to make the hardest decisions, knowing the least amount of information.
That's right. And so anyway, that's why then I ended up becoming an appellate judge, and I've been that since I was elected in 2012. But my passion for juvenile and child welfare has continued. So that is sort of the Rhonda Wood sort of story and why I'm here. But I wanted to talk to you about that. A lot of people don't realize sort of and know what we do, and that's probably because we're not great communicators and get out. We sort of are locked away in our building, and the joke is that it's sort of like when you're on the Supreme Court, you're in a nursing home, and if you wander the halls too much, like the security comes and escorts you back to your room, and then nobody comes and sees you at all, and the phone never rings. So that's what it's like to be on the Arkansas Supreme Court. So that's why we get excited about coming here and come here versus Vegas, because it's like there's your real people. So anyway, so I got out today. To tell you, I want to give you a little bit about what we are. And so at the Arkansas Supreme Court, we do have the Commission on Children, Youth, and Families. And then under that, we have an advisory council. And then, I know a lot of you know this, but we have an administrative office of the court as well. And there's a juvenile division within that. And in that juvenile division, we have a court improvement program. We have house the state CASA director. We house the ad litem director. And we hire the ad litems, and we have a juvenile justice facilitator, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we also have a data sort of division, computer information systems that is tailored to provide data and track data to improve outcomes in juvenile justice. So Brooke Steen is our AOC juvenile justice director. And then I have on here, and I'm happy I sent this to Heather, so Heather is free to send this out to all of you, but so that way you know who these people are, so she can do that. But so Kurt Meredith is our we have a senior staff attorney. Tori Foreman is the court improvement coordinator. And so the court improvement coordinator, what that is the federal government through the Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention gives every state a certain amount of monies, federal dollars, and it goes directly to the Supreme Court, and it's for court improvements in the areas of child welfare. specifically. So if those of you, if you've never been, but if not, you need to come, but the Children in the Courts annual conference, it's every May, that is paid for through the Court Improvement Program. And there's other things that they award grants out. So the purpose of that is to award grants out to improve child welfare and outcomes in child welfare. And then we have the Atlanta Director, Janet Bledsoe, the State CASA Director, Lauren Greer. Our Juvenile Justice Specialist is Kevin Hoffman. His job is, once we got that position, is he had to go through and they had to retrain every juvenile probation and intake officer in the state and come up with standardized training that had not been done prior to 2014. It was sort of, willy-nilly, and so we raised the level of professionalism. And then Nikisha Davis is the head of our data division, along with Michelle, to do that. So you guys are welcome to do this. If you want to know ever who to contact, these are the people. Then the Commission to Children, Youth, and Families, I'm the chair. I've been the chair since 2014. I temporarily took a little bit of a leave through March, and right now Judge Brown, Ernest Brown, and Judge Troy Braswell have been standing in as interim chairs. We have an administrator of that. It's been Clarissa Prince. Clarissa Prince is leaving at the end of December to do a different position within our organization, but Ashley Figueroa will be stepping in as of January 1st for that to help us. And so this is the membership of the commission. If you can see it, it's a lot of the stakeholders. So there's juvenile judges across the state, and then we usually have parent council. We have the secretaries of the DHS, Secretary of Department of Education, children advocates, state senators, usually state representatives, disability rights, DYS, DHS, and we bring them to the table. We meet every quarter and keep everybody sort of moving to improve the system. So we also have an advisory council. I invite any of you with an organization and 100 families, if you want to join the advisory council. It is around 45. It has individual nonprofits. It has foster care parents as part of it. So it is a wider branch. And what we found out is when we sort of began the commission is that we had more work and we had more people interested. So 2 years ago, we started the advisory council. It has grown to about 40 people. They meet before the commission meeting. And so it is a larger group, and it is now feeding into the commission, and that's also where we're now getting our new commissioners, so they get experience in the advisory council. So the Commission on Children, Youth, and Families started in 2011, so we're involved with any issue where children and families intersect with the court to improve that process. So if you think about that, that's really any case type, right? But we primarily have dealt with either juvenile justice and delinquency or child welfare. Our vision is to ensure that all children and their families have the resources to have the best outcomes in the system. And our mission is obviously to do that and reform it and improve it. So the benefits of having the commission is to streamline communication between all stakeholders, enlarge and enhance their input, avoid what we found out is that we're all duplicating resources, and I'm sure that's what you found with 100 families, and then increase collaboration and expanding projects. So what we've sort of done is, if you look at it, the Supreme Court Commission is staffing concerns, dealing with how to address staffing concerns, both with child welfare, within the agency, but also then within juvenile probation officers and intake officers. We've changed a lot with counties. One of the things that we've done is we've worked hard to change the reimbursement. Juvenile, from the delinquency side, juvenile officers get a certain salary, and then half of that is reimbursed to the county. But what we found out is the counties were sort of being left with still a large part, and salaries were extremely low, and statewide they were extremely low, And so we worked and bumped that up. The reimbursement was maxed at $15,000, and we bumped that up and got the legislature to pass that so counties could be reimbursed up to $20,000. So that was one of the works of the commission. The other thing is whatever the state appropriated, if there weren't enough officers, that money used to go back to the state at the end of the fiscal year, and there was a couple $100,000. And so Senator Irvin worked with us, and we had legislation change that the appropriation amount could stay, and we could award that back to the counties for grants to improve juvenile justice. So now all that money if there's money left over, it goes back directly to the counties, so the counties get that money as well, since the state had already sort of expected to lose that money. So we've done that to work with that sort of thing. Partnering, obviously we've included that. Data, we've become really data driven and trying to sort of similar to what you have. We have focused primarily on the juvenile side. We have received probably at least $4 million in grants to improve data. We've partnered with the National Center for Juvenile Justice and had them come in, and their data guy come in and run data. And we have just recently now put it out we have pilot counties. Sebastian is one of our pilot counties, and we have now recently, this week we met and provided the data, but we have determined it by race, ethnicity, and gender. We're looking at arrest rates and juvenile disposition rates and petition filings to see where the point of contact is and if there's any disproportionate minority contact. And so we've run that with the crime information centers and with some information with the FBI and narrowed into those numbers so that we can figure out if there's anywhere that we need to change within the system. So that's been one of our big projects. Raising awareness, we've done a lot. I did not bring them today, but we put out some brochures, and so I can send those to Shannon and provide those. One of the big things we did was on child testimony, that we found out that through actually watching some of the appellate cases, some appellate cases were reversed because of how sort of ruling happened with a child being allowed to testify and the parent being sort of not allowed in the room, or some things happened. And what we found out was it wasn't necessarily always the judge's fault or the prosecutor's fault, but it was like everybody didn't have all the information. And so what we did is we put together a brochure, and we put together a bench card for the judges and a bench card for the prosecutors. And it says, if you are going to ask for a closed hearing, here are the legal requirements and the findings that you have to make. Here's when you have to make the motion. Here's what you have to do. And then we also put back best practices that if a judge, if you are going to put on a witness, judge, think about what is the best time of the day for a child to testify, right? Think about, can they bring a comfort item into the courtroom? So just some best practices for sort of, bringing down the tension of the child. So we have those. I'll send them to you, and you guys can have those brochures. But we send them out to all the prosecutors and send them out to all the judges, so that those sort of, someone forgets a factor, and then now you're sending it back, and the worst thing is that child has to get back on the stand and retestify, which is just a terrible sort of outcome.
Now, to be clear, that's not for juvenile cases, because those can be closed anyway.
They can be closed, but it's about removing the parent from the room. So you'd still have to, So some of it is when you're trying them from a criminal standpoint and closing the room, but then also if you're trying to make want to have the parent who's the abuser leave and sort of be available by closed circuit, what you have to do that. So a little bit of, both. So here's what sort of we've done through the commission is on juvenile justice side, if you've heard, we've done validated assessments. That was our big rollout. It took 5 years. And so that was, juveniles were, when they came into the justice system, they were, and even when I was on the bench initially, you were sentenced, which is disposition in juvenile, by the charge. So if you got a theft of property, you got shoplifting classes. If you had a drug charge, you got substance abuse classes. But it was all charge-based. Instead, we've changed it to the juvenile delinquency petition is the ticket to the dance. So it gets you into the juvenile court, and then there is now a validated risk assessment, which is why we had to retrain everybody. And it's reassessed for your dynamic factors and your static factors, so that then you can be assessed and treated according to your dynamic factors. And you all know that sometimes my theft of property case was stealing because he was high and on drugs and had the munchies. And sometimes my best drug dealer in Conway never used drugs. He was always like, I'm too smart for that. I see what that does. But he was doing it to pay the bills because mom and dad, dad was gone, I think, and mom just had no money. And what they really needed was food on the table, and the family needed support. But that's why he was like one of the best drug dealers at Conway High. And so we just needed to find that family support. And so that's what the assessment now is, instead of just saying, oh, you're a theft of property, you must be a druggie. So we've changed the entire system since 2014. I talked about staffing and some of the other stuff. So the other big project of the commission, which I have to shout out to Judge Blatt, is in 2019, the commission decided that we should look at hybrid courts. And this is pre-pandemic, and everybody was like, what do you mean we should look at, people appearing by Zoom? Well, it wasn't Zoom then, it was just like virtually. And so we had 2 pilot judges that we asked, and one was Judge Blatt, and the other one was in Northeast Arkansas. And so we decided what platform to use. And we were all using WebEx at the court system, but we called Walmart and said, what is the most secure? We thought they might know. What do you guys use? We were like, what do you use for technology for, these virtual meetings internationally? What is the most secure? And they told us, hey, we just did a big study on this, and they sent us their results, and they told us they had just gone with Zoom. And we were like, we don't even know what Zoom is. And they were like, hey, we'll put you in contact with them. And we were like, great, we've got a shoe-in with Zoom. And so they set up a meeting, and we talked to Zoom. And so we asked Zoom if they would let us pilot in Arkansas. And we said, we have this crazy idea that courts could use Zoom. And we were thinking originally that for parents, if you're in treatment, why would you take them out of treatment to show up for a child welfare hearing, right? And disrupt it. And then we were thinking for children, why are you having them missing a whole day of court to move 3 hours, right, from foster care and travel for that little hearing, and then go back, and they're traveling with a stranger, right, oftentimes. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, this was sort of earth-shattering, let's try to use this. And so we set out all the protocol, and when we talked to Zoom, they were like, well, how many courts are you gonna need this for? And they're like, just 2, you're 2 pilots. And of course, I was like, I don't know, and I don't know how fast the other, juvenile judges, we have 30 or 40 juvenile judges, and I was like, can we just leave it open? And I hate to sort of put limits. And so we talked it through, and we signed an open contract with them. And this was to start, believe it or not, April 1st, 2000. And so we had the contract for free for Zoom for a year, starting April of 2000. And the pandemic hit March of 2000. So we had it for all the courts in Arkansas, and we had it already set up, everything, all the protocols. We had worked with DHS about everything, all the record, how to put it on record. We had it for free. So Georgia spent $400,000 the first year on Zoom of the pandemic, and we had it for free.
Yeah.
So I tout, Judge Blatt was on our committee and had agreed to pilot it and take this risk. And so it saved our state an incredible amount of money. And that was part about being on the commission, because DHS was on the commission, and so they said they would use Zoom. Department of Education was on the commission. They said they would use Zoom, so we had it all set up, and so it just was seamless when it hit. And we used it for all the courts in all, case types. So it's one of the best things I've seen, just sort of a God thing happened with the commission. But Judge Blatt was, willing to take a chance on it. So the other thing we're doing now is we're following up with the hybrid courts. And so we're doing surveys. If you show up at a meeting, any child juvenile conferences, you're probably gonna get surveys from us. So now we're trying to track down, like this is one that we just did, we're trying to track, is the Wi-Fi not working in the courtroom, are there tech equipments? Now we're trying to figure out how to make it a better experience, where the issues are, so we can correct it. The other thing is we're trying to figure out where the child is appearing from. So if you look at this pie chart, that's school, CASA, foster, the different places. Because Department of Education is working with us, if there's a school issue, they have agreed to work with the local school districts to try to solve that problem. So we're trying to sort of gather information about if there's a problem with the child appearing, where's that occurring, and where is that happening. A lot of it is the foster. What we found out is the blue is the foster home, and we weren't sure if that's really the best place for the child to be sort of appearing from virtually. So we kind of are gonna start sort of diving in deeper to that. But that's sort of where we are. The Advisory Council in 2003, they started a statewide reunification day. We did that in Little Rock at MacArthur Park, and now we're trying to decide whether to keep doing it. Probably won't do it locally, but we'll probably have it as one day, but do it in different parts of the state the same day to celebrate that. We're also, the Advisory Council is reorganizing the juvenile code, which you attorneys would probably appreciate. The juvenile code makes no sense. So there's no substantive rewrites, but reorganizing it in a manner that you actually put delinquency together and child welfare together. So we're actually reorganizing that, and they are in process of doing that for not the fiscal, but the next full session. So if you want to engage with us, one of the things you can do, there is a code here, and you fill out a form, and then you tell us what you want and who you are, and then we will start engaging with you. So you can do that and fill out that little form, and we will keep you engaged. The other thing is we have a newsletter, and we dedicate a portion of the newsletter to talking about organizations that are not part of us necessarily. So we always want you to share with us, and we will do a feature story, and we always try to focus on a different organization and what they're doing to sort of give them that press. And we always run a list of events across the state. So we want to know what your events are and help sort of facilitate people to show up and come to your events. So that's available. And you can't read this very well, but that's our website. And then we also are on Twitter, YouTube, all of that sort of good stuff. But it's AR Children's Commission, COMM.org. Like I said, Heather can send this out as well. But with that, I'll open it up to any questions. And I know